This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider.
The problem we have is the government's not provided clarity in relation to what powers we have. They've not given us the resources we need. But also, unless they're careful, a local lockdown will have no real teeth because people will be free to just get in their car and go somewhere else, to go to an area where there isn't a local lockdown.
London Mayor Sadiq Khan has a stark warning. The pandemic isn't over and we're not ready for a second deadly outbreak. More than 8,000 Londoners have already lost their lives to the virus, and he says there's a serious risk others could too. He's calling for more powers to help avoid another devastating outcome should another wave hit. But our editorial column says the Mayor and Prime Minister should be working together to keep our city safe.
Where are the plans to protect London if coronavirus spikes again? You'd hope that months after the coronavirus crisis began, the rules would be laser sharp, the systems ready to go, and everyone working together to catch infection to make sure rates do not start to soar again. Unfortunately, you'd be wrong. The system isn't ready, and there's another big problem too. It's still proving too hard to track infection rates and share information fast. The government says councils should lead the response, but that's wrong. It's a job for the Mayor and the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister needs to get clear rules for emergency local lockdowns in place, and then tell the country how they would work so we can prepare. The Mayor needs to lead London's response, not blame others. That means pulling together resources from across the city, rather than just tell us that the city isn't ready. He should ask himself why and sort it out. We got our response to coronavirus wrong the first time around. We cannot afford to do that again.
Public health chiefs today tried to calm fears of apparent increases in cases in some London boroughs, but at the local level, town halls are scrambling to prepare for a second wave. The Evening Standard's Cecil has pieced together their action plans to stop an outbreak spiralling out of control. He joins me now. Nick, what information do the boroughs have to work with?
All London councils have now published COVID local action plans or COVID local control plans. And basically they explain how the town halls and other local bodies would respond to an outbreak of coronavirus in their area. There's some things that they're still lacking though, and in particular they're lacking detail about what measures they could introduce for local lockdowns. At the moment, there are already some existing powers which they could use. For example, restricting gatherings and events. They could close premises that pose an infectious risk to the public, and they can even detain individuals who pose an infectious risk to the population. The local councils don't have information yet on what they could do, for example, to restrict people moving around. Already in Leicester, the government has advised against all but essential travel, but certainly the London councils don't know how they would enforce that or bring that in at the moment.
So what are the blueprints that the councils have prepared so far?
So, some of the plans are very detailed, kind of 90 pages long. Others are far more concise. And basically, most of them have a kind of a 7-pronged outline. So what that includes is initially trying to prevent and manage outbreaks in settings such as schools and care homes, also preventing and managing outbreaks in other high-risk locations such as offices and other workplaces, religious settings. Then there's deploying local testing capacity effectively, contact tracing, particularly for complex settings and groups. Access to local data needs to be there in place to prevent outbreaks. Good communications is vital, and also another crucial point is how do you support vulnerable people. At the moment, there's a particular issue over getting enough local detailed data for the councils to respond effectively. The government has improved that. Public Health England is getting more information over. And there's even a question now about whether postcode data level, so very detailed data down to individual postcodes, whether that should be published. The government is not doing that at the moment, presumably on privacy grounds. But the question arises, the people who really need to know about an outbreak in a street are the people who live in that street. So I think the government will come under more pressure to publish new cases by postcode.
And do they have backing from the government?
The government backs the blueprints, and actually the council had to prepare these blueprints by today. And interestingly enough, they also talk about how they would respond working in conjunction with other councils, neighbouring councils, if there was an outbreak. Obviously, coronavirus doesn't stop at borough boundaries, so if there's an outbreak, you could easily see several boroughs working together. And if there's a major outbreak, councils, or many councils, probably lack the resources to deal with a huge outbreak. So then they have something called mutual aid, where they could call in help from other councils in London. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is also very keen to see more powers given to the capital to enforce local lockdowns if necessary.
And is there a sense that the councils need more clarity from the government about what they can actually do?
They want more detailed, up-to-date data on new cases in the local area, because once you've got that information, you can respond swiftly and effectively. There are also concerns have been raised about the effectiveness of test and trace. There still are a large number of people who don't really trust the system, maybe because they don't understand it fully, but who may be unwilling to take part. And if test and trace doesn't work, then it's far harder to control outbreaks. And there's one other issue, which is funding. Some councils, for example Brent, which have been very hard hit by coronavirus, say that they're not receiving enough government funding to properly plan to deal with outbreaks.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.